denigrate others.
Barbara Walters and Minister Louis Farrakhan.
You want money paid to every African American?
The most controversial black leader in America, defending remarks about whites, Koreans, Jews.
The language is harsh.
Harsh, you call it. Other people would call it vile.
A preacher inflamed by past injustice.
That we should die to go to a toilet? That we should die to have a cup of coffee?
Suspicious.
It is your feeling that the U.S. government is deliberately spreading it.
It is my feeling.
Passionate.
Can you understand our hurt?
A riveting interview. Barbara Walters face to face, point for point with Minister Farrakhan. And
his name is Louis Farrakhan, leader of the movement called the Nation of Islam. His speeches and those of some of his colleagues have been seen as anti-Semitic, anti-Catholic, anti-white. So why would we give him a place to air those views? Well, we do it so that you can make your own informed judgment about what he really stands for.
Few people do know the views of the Nation of Islam or its leader, Louis Farrakhan, and you must know both to decide where you may, if at all, agree or where you may want to challenge and condemn. That's why I went to Chicago last week to interview this man who is both inspired and inflamed. His message and the man himself are contradictory and complicated. The man who makes this beautiful music is better known for booming rhetoric and widely dissonant chords. The hand that caresses this violin on one stage can condemn with a gesture on another.
And if you measure white people up against the Torah and the law, the Injil or the Good News, or this book, the Quran, which is the criterion, they are absolutely devils.
Louis Abdul Farrakhan, minister and leader of the Nation of Islam, was born Louis Eugene Walcott in Roxbury, Massachusetts, 60 years ago. He heads a movement that may have as few as 10,000, as many as 200,000 members. The actual numbers are closely guarded. Farrakhan says his message is black love, but it often has overtones of hate.
And because I said that the Holocaust of black people was 100 times worse than the Holocaust of Jews, they were angry with me for even comparing this. And it is because you feel that your life is so much more sacred than the lives of the Goyim or the lives of the Gentiles or the lives of the Asians, Arabs, and Africans.
Farrakhan's Nation of Islam is the successor to a movement started by the self-proclaimed prophet Elijah Muhammad in the 1930s. It weathered a split in the 1960s when its most popular minister, Malcolm X, defected. He was assassinated in 1965, a murder that still has elements of mystery about it to this day. Elijah Muhammad died in 1975, and shortly after, Farrakhan became the head of a restructured Nation of Islam. Farrakhan acquired an unlikely partner in 1985. Libyan strongman Muammar Gaddafi gave him a $5 million loan, interest-free, to start up a business based on individual black entrepreneurs. The Nation of Islam now operates several profitable businesses. Its social agenda is aggressive and surprisingly conservative. Its members shun guns, abstain from drugs and alcohol, and follow strict dietary laws. They are against abortion and homosexuality and for law and order.
That's right.
In prisons, they run an intensive outreach ministry. On the streets, Farrakhan's followers patrol black housing areas, battling drug dealing and other crime. They're seeking government contracts for this kind of work. Farrakhan himself has been married for 36 years, has 9 children and 24 grandchildren. He lives in this ornate mansion in the Hyde Park neighborhood of Chicago. It was built by founder Elijah Muhammad in 1972 to serve both as his official residence and the nation's headquarters. We met amid its mirrored walls and white marble floors And I discovered that while his public rhetoric is fiery, Louis Farrakhan can be surprisingly soft-spoken. Mr. Farrakhan, our whole country has been moving toward integration, equal rights. You don't want integration. You want separate schools and, if possible, a separate territory in this country or in Africa.
Separation is not the main goal. That is the goal. If we cannot get along in peace, then we have to separate. Like two married people who have tried to live together and have irreconcilable differences. They go before a judge and there's a settlement and there's alimony.
And you want reparations like alimony?
Yes.
To every African American? You want money paid to every African American?
Why should not America do something to repair the damage that has been done to Black people for over 400 years of oppression?
By giving everyone money?
Not money. A fool and his money will soon part. If you gave our people with their mentality today $20,000, $40,000, $100,000, it would go right back out of our community tomorrow. But if we are allowed land and money, a way to become economically self-sufficient, to do for ourselves, to build homes, to build factories, then we would say America is beginning to repair the damage.
You have had great success with many of the Nation of Islam men as security guards in your own projects and other projects, sometimes better than the police. And you are hoping that the federal, and the state, and the local governments will use taxpayers' money to hire your people at various projects. And then your prophet and mentor, Elijah Muhammad, said, and I have the quote, "The white man is so wicked and filthy that God calls him the skunk of the planet Earth." How do you expect taxpayers' money, that's all Americans, white and black, to want to fund the Nation of Islam when there is language like that?
The language is harsh, but the reality of Black existence and Black suffering is also very harsh.
Harsh, you call it, other people would call it vile. Do you stand by that language?
The harsh language was designed to knock on your door and get your attention.
It did.
And that we did.
The man whose harsh language attracted attention to the Nation of Islam most recently was Khalid Abdul Muhammad, then the nation's official spokesman and one of Louis Farrakhan's most trusted aides. In a speech at King College in New Jersey last November, Khalid proudly proclaimed he was an anti-Semite and called Jews bloodsuckers. When the speech attracted criticism, Farrakhan demoted Khalid. He said Khalid had used mean-spirited language, but had also spoken some truths. I would like to go through some of the things that he said and have you tell me, if you will, where are the truths and which are the truths that you still stand by. Jews are sucking the blood of the blacks. Jewelry is really Jew-elry because Jews have been stealing all over the face of the planet Earth. That's why they're called Goldstein or Silverstein. No matter who sits in the seat at the White House, Jews control that seat. Jews control the media, especially NBC, ABC, and CBS. By the way, out of the 5 networks, including CNN and Fox, only one CEO is Jewish. Final. The Pope is a no-good cracker. Somebody needs to raise that dress up and see what's really under there. Which are the truth?
While I rebuked the vile manner of his speech, I said I stand by those truths that he spoke. I stand by the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Now, if we are specific here, I cannot answer about jewelry or the name Goldstein or Rubenstein. Those Khalid Abdul Muhammad would have to answer. But if he calls Jews bloodsuckers of the Black community, if we're going to be honest, in the 60s, many Jews were the merchants, they were the landlords, they were the furniture persons that we bought furniture from, They were the clothiers that we bought clothing from, and they grew in strength from our trade with them. Today, it's the Arabs and the Koreans and others. So sucking the blood means taking from the life of a community that it sustains your life.
Many Koreans came to this country out of their own kind of slavery with very little money and managed to take over, working day and night and opening these
But how
stores.
did they do that, Miss Walters? Their culture and their cohesiveness allowed them to pool their resources.
Fine, but in
this.
putting down, I mean, you are trying to raise the culture and the initiative of the African Americans, and it's there to be raised. But is the way to raise it calling those who had raised themselves, whether they were Jews, Koreans, Arabs, bloodsuckers?
That is not my language. So
but you stood by that truth. I mean, this is what one has to clear up.
Ms. Walters, I told you what truths that I stood by.
Okay,
but
do you stand by that?
We are dying. Others are growing to strength. Now, if you ask, what is a bloodsucker? A bloodsucker is a leech. And when you put a leech on your skin, that leech sucks blood from you in order to maintain its own life. After all, Miss Walters, we have fought, bled, and died in every theater of war that this country has had for a freedom that we yet don't enjoy.
But whites can say, and Irish and Scots and Jews and Italians, that they have also fought and died in wars. What I am asking and what people are asking, and I can go on with other questions, is how does it help your people to denigrate others?
It does not help us to denigrate people. But you know, Miss Walters, as well as I, when you exploit the ignorance of a people, that is not somebody lifting themselves up. That's somebody lifting themselves up at the expense of somebody else. It means that something is wrong and very wrong.
This book is one of the tools the nation uses to point out what it sees as wrong. It details what the Nation of Islam's research department describes as a secret relationship between blacks and Jews, claiming that Jews were large-scale slave owners. It is said to be based on Jewish writings, but scholars have criticized the book as inaccurate and distorted. The statistics that you give can be rebuked and refuted by Jewish scholars, but I'd like to go beyond you and me arguing about how many Jews there were as slaveholders. That was over 100 years ago. We now have relations with Germany. We don't hold what happened in Hitler's Germany against the young Germans. Why now are the sins of the fathers being visited upon the sons?
Miss Walters, you have relationships with Germany today because Germany has moved to right a terrible wrong.
Why pick on the Jews particularly, which is what you've done?
I have not picked on the Jews in particular. You know, this idea of a victim.
No. It's not the secret history of blacks and whites, or blacks and Scots, or blacks and Italians. It's blacks and Jews.
And the reason for that, Miss Walters, is because we all know that Gentile whites had some part in it. But there are many Jews who do not know the role that some Jews played in the slave trade. And it was a prominent role. But whether it was marginal or prominent, the fact of the matter is Jews have succeeded in the world. Blacks are at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder.
But you know, especially in our time, Jews have felt that they had a desire and an obligation to help blacks. We had the civil rights marches in which you had so many Jews who participated, and you had young Jewish men who were murdered, like Andrew Goodman and Michael Schwerner. The Jews who have felt that they were more allied with blacks and perhaps even other nationalities would feel hurt. Can you understand how they feel?
Can you understand, Miss Walters, how we feel? Blacks were bitten by vicious dogs and beaten with clubs and cattle prodded and water hoses put on us. 2 or 3 whites died. Many, many blacks died. Died for what? That we could drink water at a fountain and go to toilet? What was our sweat and our blood in all of these wars for? That we should die to go to a toilet? That we should die to have a cup of coffee? Can you understand our hurt?
I can never fully understand what your people went through. I can try as a human being, regardless of what my religion or race may be. I can try, you can try. What I am asking is, can't the Nation of Islam put an end to the name calling? I would like to play something to you that I think is particularly horrific. If it happened in a white man's mouth, if I did it, I couldn't even get the words out of my mouth. And maybe once and for all, we can talk about what you consider true or not true or anti-Semitic and so forth. This was after Keene College. And this is one of your ministers again, Khalid Muhammad. We have a tape. I'd like you to listen to it.
But it's that old no-good Jew. It's that old imposter Jew. It's that old hook-nosed, bagel-eating, lock-eating Johnny-come-lately, perpetrating a fraud, just crawled out of the caves and hills of Europe, so-called damn Jew.
Those words, again, represent Brother Khalid's anger and frustration. It is not proper, in my judgment, to mock physical characteristics, cultural habits of another people. What I'm telling you is this, that when I have to look at a movie and see a black person depicted as a buffoon.
You don't anymore. It's changed.
But the image is there. When I've got to go to school and read a textbook about little black Sambo.
It's changed. It's
when
no
I've
longer
got
there.
to hear people calling me a burrhead nigger and making mockery of the thickness of my lips and the broadness of my nose.
Only ignorant people do that.
So if Brother Khalid is saying that which stings and hurts, then look at it and say, that's terrible use of language. And then go back and look at the terrible use of language by your people.
But this is the present he's saying this. This isn't 10 years ago or 20 years ago.
But our people are suffering, Miss Walters, in the present for what was done in the past. Yes, there should be a change. We should become more civil in our language. But that rebuke and that stinging language of Brother Khalid is enough to make you say, my God, this is terrible.
Is it enough to make you say that it is wrong and that you disown it as a truth?
But I have said that.
Okay, I think people would like to hear you say it now.
I have said that, but I don't want my words to be used to create division. Khalid Muhammad is my brother. Khalid Muhammad is my son in the ministry. And Khalid Muhammad is a helper of mine. So I am trying to correct him, but not destroy him. And I will not do that so that others can say Farrakhan condemned his brother and renounced him. I'm not in the renunciation, denunciation pattern. I'm in a redemptive pattern.
Although Minister Farrakhan told us last week in our interview that he rebuked Khalid Muhammad, just this week in Washington, Mr. Muhammad told an audience at Howard University, and I quote, "I'm going to be like a pit bull. That's the way I'm going to be against the Jews," unquote. He also made inflammatory anti-white remarks.
Incredible stridency there. Coming up on the program, Louis Farrakhan on the assassination of Malcolm X. Did he play a role? And his view of welfare and black fatherhood. Barbara's interview continues. 30 years have passed, and still there is mystery surrounding the murder of Malcolm X. The movie Malcolm X renewed interest in the whole affair. There have been allegations that won't go away and questions that have remained unanswered about Louis Farrakhan's connection to the murder. Was he involved? Where was he the day Malcolm X died? Barbara's interview continues.
The assassination of Malcolm X stunned blacks and whites alike. He was gunned down in 1965 while addressing a meeting in New York's Harlem. Charismatic and controversial, Malcolm had broken with founding prophet Elijah Muhammad and started a separate organization of his own. His murder was apparently plotted by members of the nation's Newark Mosque in New Jersey. Followers of Malcolm X suspected at the time that Louis Farrakhan was somehow involved. And Malcolm's widow, Betty Shabazz, said recently she thought Farrakhan played a role in the murder. The controversy endures. Just recently, in an open letter to you published in Boston, 5 African-American ministers of different denominations asked this question. I will quote it. You wrote in Muhammad Speaks, "The die is set and Malcolm shall not escape. Such a man as Malcolm is worthy of death." That's your quotation. These ministers ask, given that 5 members of the Newark Mosque were identified as Malcolm X's killers by one of the assassins, and that you were reportedly at the Newark Mosque at the day of the assassination, what responsibility do you bear for Malcolm X's death? That's the end of their quote. Dr. Betty Shabazz, the widow of Malcolm X, also believes you helped plot his death. So may I respectfully ask their question, what responsibility do you bear for his death? Do you approve of the fact that Malcolm X was murdered? Were you at all involved in that murder?
I'll take your last question first. No, I was not in any way involved in his murder. I did say those words or write those words, but that's not the full statement. I said such a man as Malcolm is worthy of death. And were it not for Elijah Muhammad's faith in God, it would have been so. Elijah Muhammad told all of us as his followers to leave Malcolm alone and leave Malcolm to Allah. I was in Newark at that time, the time of his assassination. It was my turn to be rotated into Newark to handle the preaching or the teaching that day. And that is my reason for being in Newark. Betty Shabazz never said that Farrakhan was a plotter in the death of Malcolm, but she said that Farrakhan helped to create the atmosphere. And that I can agree with. And in defending the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, charge and countercharge, we created an atmosphere. But don't leave out the United States government. Don't leave out the FBI, who had worked for years to separate Malcolm from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Now, the last part of your question, yes. Do I approve? At that stage of my development, I was very angry with Malcolm for what Malcolm had done. I was hurt by his assassination. I can't say that I approved, and I really didn't disapprove. I was numb. But today, looking back, Malcolm would be so much more valuable to us alive.
The number one problem in this country today is crime and violence, especially among young African Americans. You give specific solutions to the problems of crime, violence. Can you tell us what they are?
Well, first, Black people have been taught systematically to hate themselves. So our people have a hatred for self, which manifests itself in our disunity and our inclination to violence among self. We must teach our people the knowledge of self. Self-knowledge produces self-love. And I'm going around this nation talking to young Black men, teaching them to love themselves and making them to pledge to do good by self and others, and thereby not needing a gun.
There is a great breakdown of family in this country and illegitimate births. Do you have solutions?
Yes. The family, however, was broken down because of slavery. The slave master fed us, clothed us, and sheltered us. So that mentality obtains to this day. If we really want to be respected as men, then we must take up our own responsibility, not just making a baby, but fathering it, maintaining it, nurturing it.
You're against welfare.
Yes. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad says welfare spelled backwards means farewell to independent and creative thinking. So as fast as we can, we move our people away from welfare.
In an interview in the Washington Times in 1990, you said, the crack epidemic did not start until after Louis Farrakhan became the voice of the poor. And about guns, you said, somebody is inspiring the black people to kill off each other. We believe it's the government of the United States of America. Do you really believe that crack and guns are being introduced into black neighborhoods by the United States government? And if so, do you have proof?
Every black leader that we have had of substance, the government has been his or her opposer. The fact of the matter is that there was no crack prior to 1985 when Farrakhan spoke at Madison Square Garden in New York and nearly 50,000 people came out to hear him. The fact of the matter is that in the 60s when blacks began moving in the civil rights movement, a purer form of heroin was introduced into the black community. That is a fact.
So you think it might be the government?
I believe with all my heart that there's a dirty hand here somewhere. And if the government is not responsible, then help me clean it up.
What about AIDS, Minister Farrakhan? You said the U.S. government is responsible for the spread of AIDS in Africa to decimate the African people.
I don't think those were my exact words.
Let me read them to you and
Sure.
let's clear it up because I really want this to be correct. Yet, you said the spread of international AIDS was an attempt by the U.S. government to decimate the population of Central Africa. It came at the African American Summit in New Orleans in your speech in 1989.
Do you know where the AIDS, where they say the AIDS virus was developed? Have you heard?
I don't think anyone knows exactly where it came from. But
Right,
I'd like
right
to ask
outside of Washington.
So it is your feeling that the U.S. government is deliberately spreading AIDS?
It is my feeling.
And finally, at the end of our dialogue, we asked Minister Farrakhan what he most wanted people to know about the Nation of Islam.
I would like the people to know that the Nation of Islam was raised by God as a remedy for the ills not only of our people, but there's something of value that we have that can remedy the ills of this nation. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that he believed that a peace could be formed with the Jews and the blacks in America. I believe the same, and I believe it's time.
Minister Farrakhan is very convincing in expressing his beliefs, but we checked on his claims about AIDS and crack, and I'd like to tell you what we found. Expert researchers and sociologists not associated with the government say that crack was already deeply entrenched in major U.S. cities prior to Minister Farrakhan's 1985 speech, and that the principal agent of its distribution was not the U.S. government, but illegal immigrants, primarily from Jamaica and the Dominican Republic. As for AIDS, most leading independent scientists conclude that the virus most likely came from animals, probably not in Africa, or probably in Africa, my notes say, but not from any laboratory.
No, I'd like your opinion.
Okay.
Might Louis Farrakhan and his ministers come to think that they would be more effective if they did not spread suspicion about the government in general and whites in particular.
Well, that is what one would hope. I mean, it's kind of a good cop, bad cop question. The Nation of Islam does some very good things, and that's the good cop, and that's Louis Farrakhan when he's moderate and smiling and effective. The bad cop is someone like Minister Khalid Muhammad and the vituperative vitriol of the language. Now, it may be that the only way to bring young black men into the movement when they have felt disenfranchised and hopeless is to spit on the whites. You know, I can stand up to all of you. If that's the case and that's the only way, then there will be people who will feel that Farrakhan is the demagogue. If it can be done by the good of their programs and not by trying to destroy others, then he will be a leader.
This would suggest that the movement might mellow in the future, if this comes about the way
Mr. Farrakhan has said that he is mellowing, and that it's time for a dialogue. We'll see.
Fascinating interview. Thank you, Barbara.
Fascinating man.